Hi guys, welcome back to another video. As a lot of you know, I talk an awful lot about this little lady right here and the conditions that she has and how that affects our day-to-day life. But what I don't tend to talk about as much is my eldest son and his autism and our journey to his diagnosis and how that affects our day-to-day life. So I thought I would make a whole separate video, give Zach his time to shine. No, he is not here at the minute, he's actually at school. So it's just me and Avery until later on. So Zachary just turned 9 back in June and I actually fell pregnant with him when I was 19, so I was quite young. My pregnancy was pretty straightforward, the birth was textbook, and he was generally a very quiet, happy baby. The only thing that ever made us suspicious when he was a baby is he did a lot of hand flapping whenever he was excited or anticipating anything. He would do this, and if he was sat in his high chair, he'd be doing it with both of his hands and his feet. And I remember at the time my mum said, you know, that is actually a sign of autism, and I just shrugged it off like, no, that's silly, there's nothing else that would suggest that, so why would I think it? Then fast forward to when he was about 2 and he started preschool. The preschool were actually really quick to pick up that he had a speech delay, so his speech wasn't as advanced as it should have been at 2 years old. He might have said a couple of words, maybe no. He didn't call me mummy at that time. He actually called me Chrissy first, which obviously is what he'd learned from other people. But I didn't get mummy for quite a while after that. They were quite quick to get early intervention involved, which really was kind of the start of the journey to his diagnosis, but it wasn't straightforward. So all around the same time, he was referred to a community paediatrician, he was referred to an educational psychologist, and also speech and language therapy. Now I'm just going to backtrack here a little bit. I had no idea that he had a speech delay. I was young, he was my first child, I was a bit of a homebody, we didn't really get out much. So I just didn't know, I didn't realise. I knew that he wasn't saying as many words as he should have, but I just didn't realise it was as severe to say that he had a delay in that area. I thought he was just a bit behind and he would catch up. Because the same thing happened with his walking. He didn't really walk until he was around 15 months old, which I know is a little bit on the later side, but still within normal limits. So the paediatrician, I think as a kind of procedural thing, he wanted to do a blood test on Zach just to kind of see if there was anything going on. So we did that and they actually picked up that he had elevated creatine kinase in his blood. I'm not a doctor and I still don't really understand it completely, but I do know it's a muscle enzyme and I know that it can be found in the blood when there are some underlying conditions, usually something muscular. I know that at the time muscular dystrophy was a word that was thrown about quite a lot, which obviously as a mum, especially as a mum for the first time when I'd not really experienced anything like that, was quite scary. And that kind of kick-started what was and still is a very, very long process of trying to find out why this muscle enzyme is increased in his blood. But I'll get to that in just a second. The paediatrician at the time really wanted to find out what was causing this increased enzyme before he would look into anything else. And at the time I wasn't too happy with that. A lot of his other professionals were recommended that we go down the ASD route because they suspected that he might have autism. But his paediatrician just wasn't interested in going down that pathway until we'd found out what was causing this elevated CK. So I actually requested to have his paediatrician changed. It was nerve-wracking at the time. I felt as though I was going against the doctors when I just didn't have a clue what I was talking about. But looking back now, I'm really glad we did because we still don't really have a definitive answer as to why his muscle enzyme is raised. While all of this was going on, the preschool and all of his other professionals were trying to put a lot of things in place to help support Zachary and just to try and map things out for the future, just to make his life a little bit easier going forward. His educational psychologist recommended he get an EHCP in place, which is an educational healthcare plan, and that would support him all the way through school. Now that was a really, really long process, and even though the application was started when he was back in preschool, it still wasn't approved and applied to him until he was already in primary school. It was actually his speech and language therapist that helped me with the application to get him assessed for autism. She was great. She really made the whole process a lot simpler for me because the form was a little bit daunting, but we got there in the end and that all school got sent off. It took around 6 months, I want to say, for the board to reach a decision on Zach's diagnosis. I've heard that it's probably a good thing that we did it while he was still so young, because when they hit a certain age, the applications can take a whole lot longer. So looking back now, I am glad that we did it then. He got his diagnosis in September 2017, which was just after he had started school. So he was diagnosed with autism, and then they'd also put a little paragraph in the... Hello? Hello? What's the matter? What's the matter? No, put in. They diagnosed him with autism, and they also suspected that he had PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance. I'll be honest, I don't know too much about it, but what I do know is the county that we live in England, they don't actually diagnose that as a condition. They do in some parts of the UK, but not where we live. So they just said that he does most likely have this, we just can't diagnose it officially. In October 2017, he got his EHCP, which was an absolute godsend because it meant that he could have one-to-one when he needed it in school, and the school got extra funding just to make sure that he was properly supported. And he does really, really benefit from it. Wow, I've just put her to bed, sat down to carry on filming this video, looked at my phone, and she's awake. Oh no, it's just not long enough, Pudding. Oh, you're still tired. I think she's just a bit warm. We're having some gorgeous weather in the UK at the moment. And why are we not outside on such a sunny day? Because school summer break is looming, and I knew there was absolutely no way I was going to get a sit-down video filmed with the boys around. So, as I mentioned earlier, Zach has had a lot of tests in his little lifetime. Alongside his autism, he has also been in and out of hospital over the last 5 years, getting different tests done. He's had countless blood tests, he's been under a geneticist, he's been under a cardiologist, he has been under a neuromuscular specialist, he's had a muscle biopsy, and they've not really found what is causing this elevated muscle enzyme. From his muscle biopsy, they diagnosed him with a non-specific congenital myopathy, which his neuromuscular specialist has told me not to be concerned about. He's not symptomatic. It's just that his biopsy wasn't completely normal and he didn't really know how to diagnose it, so that is what he's been diagnosed with. He did have a slightly abnormal arrhythmia in one of his 24-hour ECGs, so he's still under his cardiologist, and she's actually put Avery onto her list now as well. And because of Avery's cardiac arrest, she is really trying to dig deep just to see if there's anything in their genetics that could be linking them together. So I imagine I will be due for some tests soon as well. But so far, both of their little hearts are working as they should. Zach is a great kid. He is really loving. He loves to make people laugh. He's just full of information. He retains information of topics that he's really interested in. So for a while it was dinosaurs, and he knows so much about dinosaurs, and if he learns something he'll remember it and then he'll want to recite it out to us at home. He's in year 4 now and he's doing great at school. He is behind in a lot of subjects. He's behind by a couple of years, but because he's got that EHCP, it means that he can still stay with all of his peers and he doesn't need to be kept back at all. He has been discharged from speech and language therapy now. They worked with him all the way up until last year. Zach's speech isn't where it should be for his age. I know that, and I did question the speech and language therapist at the time and asked, why are you discharging him? His speech isn't where it should be. I wasn't really very familiar with this therapist just because he worked with Zach in school. But when I spoke to him, he basically said that his speech was good enough. He can communicate well enough in school so that he's not being held back in any way because of his speech. He does still get a lot of his sentences mixed up. His words get mixed up a little bit, and sometimes he can say she instead of he or vice versa. There was a time, and it was actually when he first started primary school, that I spoke to the teachers and I said that I was worried because he can communicate with us, but you know when, if any of you are parents and when your child was a toddler, you could completely understand what they were saying to you, but anyone else couldn't. They were speaking gibberish. And that was basically what it was like with Zach. I understood him, I knew how he communicated, but if he spoke to anyone else, I would kind of have to repeat what he was saying to them so they could understand. But luckily his communication never really caused too many problems. In terms of how his autism displays now, like I said, he really is a wonderful kid. He can become quite overwhelmed and upset if something doesn't go the way he thinks it's gonna go. So he's always struggled with transitions. That was one of the things that school have really been working on with him, and he's doing much better than he was before. Before, he couldn't go from one sort of scenario or lesson to another without being fully prepared a good half an hour in advance, because he just did not do well with transition. He is doing much better with that now, but if something doesn't happen that we've told him will happen, or vice versa, he can become quite upset. And it's the same if something's not working. So Zach has a Nintendo Switch, and if the game glitches or it doesn't go the way he wants to, or he can't get a controller to work properly, he will immediately become very teary, very overwhelmed. It's similar when it comes to control as well. So Zach and Eli, they fight like cat and dog, but I mean, what brothers don't at that age? Their fighting has gotten worse in the last year, and the reason why I think that is because Eli's getting older and he's starting to push back because he's getting his own views. He's learning how he likes to do things, whereas before it's always been they do what Zach wanted to do and that's the way he liked it. So he's not too keen on losing that little bit of control over Eli, I suppose. He can take himself off into his own little world, and he will take 2 pieces of anything. So it will be Lego. I've seen him do it with cling film. It doesn't matter what the objects are, but he will sit and he will put them in front of his face, sort of this close to his face, and he will play like that, and he'll make these bizarre noises. And I spoke to his Senko about it at school once, and she said she thinks it's the way he processes sensory overload. So he's got something close to his face and he's making very, very loud noises, and she thinks that's his way of drowning out the outside world and just being in his own little world.
Zach, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, why not?
How is it that you can play a whole game with just 2 pieces of Lego?
It's just the rest of the things I just use my imagination.
You have a very good imagination.
Yeah, I do.
Now this is great when we're at home, but if he gets into this type of play when we're walking to school or when we're out and about, it can be a little bit dangerous, because sometimes he's so in his own world that he can't hear me, and we can be near roads. I kind of have to really keep a close eye on what he's doing when we're doing the school run, or if we're walking anywhere, just to make sure he's in the present and he knows what's going on around him. I think his autism definitely affects his social skills. I seem to be noticing it more and more as he's getting older. At home, for the most part, we do our best to treat the boys the same. We wouldn't reward Zach for doing something if Eli wouldn't get the same reward for doing the same thing, and it's the same with punishment. We wouldn't punish Eli for something if Zach wouldn't be punished for doing the same thing. We try our best to treat them both right from wrong in the same way. It is a little bit more difficult for Zach because sometimes we just have to take into consideration that his autism is playing a part in something he's doing. We try to give him his own space, but obviously we're all in one household, the boys share a room, so that can be quite difficult. If Zach wants to play on his own and he says that he wants to play on his own, then I will try and explain to Eli that he wants his alone time and he needs to give him a bit of space. I have found it quite difficult trying to explain Zach's autism to Eli, because obviously Eli just sees Zach as his brother and that is how it is. But sometimes there's times that I just need to say to him that Zach's mind works a little bit differently to most people's, and that's why he behaves the way he does. He doesn't seem to understand it, and I am struggling to come up with a better way to explain it to him. So if any of you guys are in this kind of situation and you've managed to think of a solution that's worked, then please let me know. In my opinion, I think Zach is quite low on the spectrum. He does function quite well, and that might just be me saying that because I'm so used to Zach. You know, someone on the outside might say something completely different, but in my opinion, he functions really well with autism. I just try and encourage him to do things that will hold his focus but will also help him in other ways. So he actually started to go to karate back in January, and honestly, it's been doing him wonders. He actually has karate tonight, so I'll probably catch up with you once I've dropped him off, because I think I need to give this little one a bit of attention now. I swear I've just seen Eli's doppelganger in the supermarket, and I'm pretty sure the mum called him Eli as well. Not relevant to this video whatsoever, but God, it was uncanny. So I'm just waiting for Zach to come out of karate. The reason why I had started taking him to karate in the first place is because I'd done a lot of research into autism and how karate can help with it, and from what I've read, it's supposed to help break down emotional and physical barriers, and obviously it's sticking within sort of routine and that sort of repetition that really helps people with autism. So Zach knows that he has his karate every single Monday. It's obviously also supposed to be really good for discipline and self-control, and that's obviously not just for people with autism but anyone, and it's just something that he can be proud of himself for. I mean, I know that I'm incredibly proud of him. It's visible, reachable progression for him as well. So like, it's not instant gratification, but he knows he has his grading every few months, and he knows if he works really, really hard, then he'll get his next belt. And he does work really, really hard for it. I feel like it's really helping him keep his focus, and it just gives him something to strive towards. He hopes he can be a black belt one day, and I really hope he reaches that goal, because it's good for him to be able to set reachable goals and then be able to work towards them. I did intend for both of them to go. I took both Zach and Eli the first time, which was back in January, and Eli's just got the attention span of a goldfish. So he went once, I watched them, I stayed that session and I watched them. Eli just couldn't pay attention. He was just fidgety, he had ants in his pants, he wasn't listening, and I noticed that Zach was spending a lot of his time keeping his eye on Eli as well, and sort of trying to whisper over to him to tell him what to do. So in a way, I'm kind of glad it's worked out this way. Eli gets to spend a little bit of time at home with my husband and Avery on his own, and I bring Zach here. Anyway, I feel like I've just rambled on and on in this video about stuff that I don't really know a lot about. I'll be honest, I don't know much about Zach's conditions. I know the bare basics. Obviously I did a little bit of research into all of his diagnoses when he got them, but autism is just such a massive spectrum, and in terms of all his medical conditions, he's fine at the moment. He is non-symptomatic. I know what to look out for if Every did start to display any symptoms of the conditions he's been diagnosed with, so feeling faint or tired, complaining of chest pains, muscle aches, things like that. Zach can communicate with me. He can tell me what he needs. He can tell me if there's something that's bothering him. But yeah, I've started doing it again. I'm rambling again. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this video has just been minutes and minutes of me rambling on and on.
Hello guys, well, I'm going to say bye-bye now. And if you want some more videos, press the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. And I hope you be one of our fans. Bye.
Very good, Zachary. Bye, guys.